You're listening to Artistic Finance, show 208. On today's show, we discuss artificial intelligence in theater design with a panel of designers from various areas of stage design. We discuss the types of AI models, the ethical concerns, how designers are using it and how they hope to use it in the future, and what parts of our workflow we're comfortable with using AI in. Now, before we start, I want to ask you to go on this journey with me. This is just the beginning of a dozen episodes over the next few months that are going to explore AI in our workflow. I'm not exactly sure what I'm hoping to get out of this or where it's going. So if you can give me grace over this course, I would appreciate it. If you are like me, you might not have any interest in learning about AI. I know for myself, I have been avoiding it, right? It's crept into my web searches and it's in all my softwares now. But otherwise, in my effort to save the planet, to save my brain, and also my integrity, I've been avoiding it. But as I've started down this rabbit hole, I have learned that these conversations are extremely necessary for us in the entertainment industry to be having. Because reaching out to my colleagues to ask them how they're using AI and if they would join me on the podcast to talk about it, I have found that many people will not talk about it. Now, the reasons they gave have fallen into three categories. The first being that they're busy and they don't use it, so they're not going to have much to contribute. Yeah. The second reason is that it's a hot button topic and they don't want to talk about it in public. Totally get that. And the third reason was the most common, and that was that AI is unethical. We should not be discussing how to use it. And those people tended to say they would only join the podcast if they could talk about how unethical it is. Now, that reasoning is quite excellent, and in my anecdotal observations is the default position taken by theater people. However, I started Artistic Finance to discuss things that nobody talks about. Because when we don't talk about things, we breed ignorance, we make mistakes that could easily sometimes have been avoided, and we get ourselves in trouble. So as I broached this topic, I realized that there is a huge subset of our industry that is not engaging this technology. And my concern is that that choice to stay away could be, like it was for me, an uninformed position. Because a lot of conversations about AI and theater are shut down before they can even get started. And as an industry, I'm thinking we are not giving enough space or grace to people who want to discuss and explore AI. Now, I get that it's a hot button issue. I did see a clip from a debate, and forgive me for not remembering where this came from, but someone said, technology is just a tool, which is neither good nor bad, and it is up to the user what they do with it. And there was a response to that from a very intelligent person, and they said, that is not true. The technology of a gun is only ever used to cause harm. That technology can never be used for good. And that is an excellent argument, and I believe that a lot of theater people see AI in a similar light. However, I don't think that's quite the case. I don't think it's a gun. But if you do, well, one, you've probably stopped listening by now. But if you are still here, I encourage you to listen to this discussion and our future discussions to help inform your opinion. Because I know things that I have heard in these discussions have helped informed how I think about it. A big thank you to my panel who agreed to have this conversation on a public platform. Throughout this show's history, we have always talked about topics that are uncomfortable for artists, but this one takes the cake. I have never found it more difficult to pull a panel together. So a big thank you. I started putting these episodes together knowing nothing about AI. I didn't have a strong opinion about it, but I was definitely leaning toward the negative. But my colleagues have taught me so much, so I hope that you also find these discussions worthwhile. And even though I didn't intend to start a whole series of episodes discussing this, it now seems like it's the responsible thing to do. Links to everything we mention is in the description box of this episode and at artisticfinance.com/208. Without further ado, let's get to the show.
You are listening to Artistic Finance, where we help creatives learn about the business of show business.
Welcome and thank you for listening. I'm your host, Ethan Steimel, broadcasting out of Lake St. Louis, Missouri. We are recording this August 2nd, 2026, and the news is wildfires in Canada, France, Spain. The U.S. and Iran are in war entering its 6th month. Inside the USA, ICE is still terrorizing and has killed 22 people so far in 2026. Flock cameras, which are tracking cars and sharing that data with law enforcement, are under public scrutiny, and they are being removed both legally and illegally across the country. Andrew Lloyd Webber says that Broadway is too expensive to produce theater on, with the announcement of Cats, the Jellicle Ball closing, even though its ticket sales were doing really well. And Hannah Sharif recently resigned as the artistic director of Arena Stage in DC. So that is our timestamp of where we are in time and space. And that's always important because it gives context to our discussion. And today it's also important because technology is changing all the time. And so case in point, a couple of years ago, Midjourney was an AI model that was creating graphics. And I felt like I heard the name every single day 100 times. And Midjourney is still around and it's powerful, but a lot of others have caught up to that to offer similar ability. So there's now Gemini, DALL-E, Stable Diffusion, Firefly, and many more. And so if you are listening to this episode in 2027 or 2028 or beyond, the technology will have different names and abilities, but don't stop listening because the ethics and the processes and these things that we're discussing, those are all still going to be relevant and important to us as individuals. So today, I welcome a whole panel of designers to this show. So let's just pass this microphone around and tell us who you are, where you're broadcasting from, and what kind of designer you are or design you practice. So let's start with David. Hello.
Hello, David Murakami, projection designer, broadcasting from Los Angeles, California.
Awesome. Carl.
Hello, Carl Faber, oftentimes a lighting designer, broadcasting from Portland, Oregon.
Anita.
Hi, I'm Anita Tripathi. I'm a scene designer, and I'm broadcasting from Charlotte, North Carolina.
Jay Duckworth.
I'm Jay Duckworth. I'm broadcasting from Brooklyn, New York, and I'm a props designer and an educator.
Awesome. Ari.
Hello, I'm Ari Fulton. I am a costume designer and educator, and I am beaming in from Crown Heights, Brooklyn.
Awesome. And last but not least, Sunny.
Hello, Sonic here, sound designer. I'm broadcasting from North Riverdale, New York City.
Amazing. All right, so let's kick off the discussion. And my hope is that we discuss how we as theater designers are starting to incorporate AI into our work. And this was the idea of set designer Vincent Gunn, who he actually listened to the episode with Carl Faber lately, and we sort of brought up the topic. And so he asked me to cover this because Vincent is not using AI, but they're hearing other people are using it and they don't want to get left behind. And I'm paraphrasing what he said, but that was roughly it. And that leads me to an important point for us and the listeners, and that is that this conversation is a judgment-free zone, right? It's a safe space, and we're allowed to mention any use of AI that we're trying, whether it be killing the planet or rotting our brains or displacing us from our very own jobs in the future, because technology is bigger than us, right? And it's changing every day. And so what we want in this discussion and the subsequent AI discussions that we'll have on this show is open and honest conversation. And knowing that as time goes on, right, our views, our practices are going to evolve. And so my 2 cents on this is that if AI is deemed unethical and it's killing the planet, that means that we as humanity can look at that and find a way for it to be ethical and sustainable. And maybe that's just very hopeful of me, but that's sort of how I think. Like, if it's unethical, what can make it ethical. So everybody listening and here, we are approaching this in good faith. And when we see some pointed comments later on social media or something from people who didn't actually listen to this full discussion, we can all know that as a collective, we had the nuanced conversation. So good luck to us all. And thank you all for being here. So let's get to it. What is AI and what are the types of it? So machine learning, that is the umbrella term. And that to me is just computers taking data from other computers or talking to other computers and then doing things. So it's just machines, it's just computers working. Then I think traditional AI is algorithmic AI or it's rule-based AI. And this I think of as Pandora, which is like a music listening thing. And I listen to Pandora and I've been doing so for like 20 years. If I listen to more country music on Pandora, the machine, the algorithm says, Ethan's listening to more country music. Let's play even more country music for him. Or let's try this bluegrass that he might like. And then there's AI models that I guess are becoming more advanced than that. And so there's things called large language models and there's things called diffusion models. I don't actually know what those words mean, but I see those words all the time. And then on top of that, there's AI systems. And those are things that orchestrate a lot of the other models. So ChatGPT, looking at a bunch of different models, I as an individual talk to ChatGPT and then it goes and works with other models. Now, in this, I know there's the word generative AI. I don't know where that fits into this. So does anybody know where does generative fit in there?
I can jump in. So yeah. So like you mentioned flock cameras in your intro, and I think that's a great example of non-generative AI. It's still definitely AI. There's still a machine learning algorithm that is creating a model, which is like a black box that we can't really see inside to understand how it works, but it's able to identify text on a license plate and report back to the eye in the sky about where we're driving, right? So that's an example of non-generative AI. It's still AI. Versus generative AI, which is basically creating something from nothing sometimes, or creating something from a modification of something similar that gets turned over into it. In either case, just to say about like machine learning, like the thing that is different about AI now, as opposed to what you just said, which was traditional algorithmic models, is that machines are teaching machines. The common metaphor that's used is like evolution and mutation, although these are all human terms and biologic terms when that's just a metaphor, right? It's still numbers and math and, linear algebra, which I don't understand. But what the basic process is, we give a test to a machine and we give instructions to a builder to build a machine. And after billions upon billions upon billions of iterations, with a given set of training data, an algorithm is created, the process by which we as humans have no idea how it happened. We understand the rules of the test, the source inputs, and the criteria of success. But then something is created at the end, which is an AI model. And so but if we look into it, we really don't understand how it works. And so that's the difference now in terms of more modern AI.
Awesome. Thank you, Jay.
It was explained to me by my students because that's great, David. Like there's 3 different ends to the beast. There's predictive AI, which is based on data. So exactly like you said, your music, and then generative makes texts for you or photos or the Will Smith eating the spaghetti, that thing, that slop. And then there's agent, which gives you tasks, which fall under self-driving cars, and it's a rule-based, like David said. So as generative, that's the stuff that creates from your input, whereas predictive is from models that you've already done. And then the last one is something you have to activate by setting a perfect task, and its goal is to complete that task. That's the only way I've known that I understand for the 3 different models.
I'm starting to get into the ethical. Which of these models should I be worried about? Taking like generative that's the creative worry. Okay, so the ethical concerns that I thought of, there's water and electricity consumption. That's a big thing, like resources hogging. There's training others or training machines on other people's creative work. That's obviously one we have to worry about. Then there's labor displacement, which is these companies that start using AI and then they're able to cut their workforce. And then there's a challenge for educators. So, how do we know that the students are doing the work or actually using their brains and thinking? Are there any other ethical concerns that I'm missed? Are those like the big ones that I got? And can we use this AI ethically? And or how are we as theater designers able to use it ethically? Like, are we able to use the algorithmic scot-free and not worry about it? Are we able to use generative at all? Because David mentioned like it creates from nothing, but also it could modify a thing. And I sort of feel like if it's something that I've created that I then want to modify, I feel like that's an okay use. So I'm just going to put this question to the group. And Jay, you've raised your hand. But can we use it ethically and or how?
The best thing that I can think of is how to apply for grants. And so if you put in like, hey, what grants are there out there for theater, or what community resources? So if you're going about it like that, or ask like if it's a small theater out, one of the Lort theaters, ask for trends and what's been selling around the area. Those are things that I think we can do. And also just like, how can we make accessibility easier? So if it's serving people instead of creating the art, I think that might be good. But then you also have to weigh that against the destruction of the planet.
Yeah. So what I sort of heard there was like for data culling and collecting data and then maybe analyzing that or seeking out the data you want sounds like a good use. However, if it's killing water resources, electricity, that's something we have to weigh in there as well.
You don't have anybody to do theater for if everybody's dead.
Very good point. Anita, you go.
Yeah, I was just gonna say, and I think this is later in your series of questions, because I'm also an educator. There's always been technology that has evolved in theater, and theater has survived all of that, and we've used that to our advantage in many cases, especially in in areas of safety and things of that nature. So I think it's a question of how can this technology enhance what we're doing, and when do you like really need to use it, right? Like, do you have to ask Chat GPT, like, where the nearest gas station is, or like, is there a way that you could look that up without using an AI model, right? So that it's not lessening these planet resources. But I also do think that, and I know people who are like, "Well, I am not using AI, I refuse. I'm not," and I have students like that, and I'm like, okay, but other people are going to be using it. And so we need to learn how to use it as a tool. And when you're talking about, the ethics of it, I think that's, that's part of it, right? Like, when do we really need to use it? When is it super useful? When is it supporting what we're doing as theater artists? And when are you just like using it to take a shortcut that you could, like, find out in some other way? Like, what time is the doctor's office open? I don't know, call the doctor's office and, like, ask them. Like, you don't have to, like, put that into the chat.
Okay. And I feel very called out because I tell my phone, I say, hello, phone, can you call so-and-so person? And I'm doing this for like 15 years. And then just a couple months ago, somebody said, that's AI. And I said, what? I've been killing the planet. Because I'm not running away from it, but I also am so like overwhelmed by it in the sense that every single software I use is using it. So I know that just by owning an iPhone, I am using it, whether or not I'm really using it heavily. Because like there's a setting in iPhone that's like turn off artificial creativity or something. So I did that.
Apple Intelligence.
So I've turned off that, right? But I still say, hello, phone, please call so-and-so. So I am using some of it. Carl, you go.
Yeah, well, you've also publicly disclosed that you still use Pandora. So good on you, Ethan, for admitting the hard truth there. Yeah, I mean, I think the things that you flagged as ethical concerns, I think one of the things that makes them so complicated is like they're not just black and white issues, like they're ongoing sort of like conversations. A lot of people have really strong opinions on parts of these, and some of it is backed up by data, like the water and electricity consumption. Like there's been a lot of dialogue about like how much, what are the actual facts about water usage, electricity usage. Obviously, there are all these data centers that are being built. The data centers generate noise. They consume a lot of electricity. They're also creating jobs for people to build these centers. They're also creating heat domes around cities because of all the excess heat and electricity. So there's like so many different variables here that it's like I think that has been one of the challenges of trying to have like a nuanced discussion about AI, because there are so many different sources of information and it's all coming all at once. And the rate of progress and advancement in this is just so fast. By the time we learn something, a new thing has come along. And so I think it's important to talk about these things as they come up. One of the things that's been really impressive to me, or I don't know, frightening, I don't know if the right word. I mean, this is kind of an interesting time to have this conversation. One of the things that's been in the news just recently is this scenario where one of the leading AI companies basically built a sandbox for one of their AIs to start working with other AIs, and it broke out of the sandbox. And like, this is an example of like kind of one of the fears that the AI industry has had, is that like once the AI becomes quote unquote self-aware, it's going to start moving at this exponential rate that we can't control. There's no kill switch. There's no sort of like, to me, that's a cause for concern. But it's also like we do also want these, like you mentioned, we do want these AIs to be learning from each other, but we also need to establish boundaries so that they play in their sandboxes. Now they're starting to break out. I mean, this is part of like a sort of, that's what makes, I think, this whole ethics conversation so complicated as discussing AI just generally outside of the field of just specifically design.
Yeah. Also, I just like my newsfeed this morning. There's a YouTuber named Hank Green or something. I don't know who he is, but he apparently does sciencey stuff, and he's just gotten in big trouble because people called him out for using AI. That's not an ethical, like killing the planet sort of thing necessarily. It was the reason people are turning on him is that he's a very genuine and authentic person, and now they're like, oh, but that wasn't genuinely you. That's a complicated ethical thing because it's about like, who are you really? not doing with like water consumption or stuff. Ari, your hand is up there.
Yeah, so someone just put something in the chat, which I think is relevant. Who said this? Anita. You posted China is pioneering underwater AI data centers to bypass the immense land, energy, and cooling constraints, which I think is an important thing to add to this conversation, is that a lot of this isn't for human advancement necessarily, but it's a weird like technological war with China. We want to be there first. And so I think a lot of the reasons why we see all of this AI ramp up is because of that. But then I also feel like we're getting mixed messaging because a bunch of companies did a whole lot of layoffs because they thought that they could do it better with AI tools. And now they're rehiring their workforce. So I think that there's something innately human with certain work that you can't just pass off to a piece of technology. And I think especially when it comes to what we do in theater and storytelling and entertainment, our jobs can't be easily passed off to an AI tool. Yeah, there are certain aspects that work, like I implemented in my work, but when it comes to the real meat and potato storytelling, you need humans. You need that soul, which computers don't have.
I am so glad to hear somebody say that, Ari, because I feel like I keep saying that. It's like, if you can show me AI taking over a lighting designer's job, maybe I'm short-sighted, but I just can't imagine that it can get that smooth. David.
Yeah. So I thought I would just talk about some of the technical things that you've brought up, just from a technical side of what I know. So first, Carl, your note about Anthropic's AI hacking Hugging Face, which is just fascinating. It's so hard for the media to report on these things without sensationalizing them. just because it's really technical what's going on. So just to give you a quick, a bit of a relief, hopefully give you a sense of relief, no, the world's not coming to an end with that particular hack. What happened was it's not like it escaped a sandbox like in the latest Mission Impossible movie where the AI took over the submarine. It wasn't like that. They uninstalled the Ethernet drivers on the computer that the machine was plugged into, that the AI was installed on, but they forgot to uninstall the ability for the AI to reinstall it. So the AI just reinstalled internet access and then got on the internet. And that computer already had all the backdoor tools to do the hack. So it's not like it was doing anything that a human in the same situation couldn't have easily done. It was just that, this machine, but it was still a significant thing because the algorithm thought very creatively in a way that humans didn't expect it to do. But to your point about what does the AI apocalypse look like if it happens, it looks like The Sorcerer's Apprentice. And I'm quoting someone here, and I can't give credit. It's another AI researcher who made this observation that it's AI happily doing the thing that we told it to do, pouring the water. It's just that we didn't put limits. We didn't think about what we were actually asking, and we put it in charge of something like the stock market, like our cars. We put it in charge of something that we shouldn't have let it control without putting guardrails up and without thinking about what the consequences could be if it happily does what we tell it to do. So that's one thing. The water and power problem, I will say, that is a massive issue. But from my perspective, I think it's also important to understand that it's an infrastructure issue more than it is a fundamental problem with AI. So I, for example, in case it hasn't been obvious, I use AI a lot in my work now as a projection designer. Almost everything that I do is local now. And that's for various ethical and legal reasons where I no longer buy into the AI system. I use open source models and I run everything locally on my computer. And it takes my computer about 20 seconds to render an image that's full resolution. That is, of course, just the first step in my process of Photoshop and tweaking and so on. But that's at 450 kilowatt, watts for 20 seconds. That's a tenth of a cent worth of electricity, as an example. And Science Versus, which is a podcast that I listen to that I like. I'm not sure if you've heard it. They did a research pass on what is the actual cost of a prompt, and they found that the average ChatGPT prompt costs about 1/10 of a microwave second. That's what they used as their metric. So it's the average ChatGPT prompt doesn't cost that much. And training too, when you factor in the many gigawatt hours that required for training, over the billions of times people are using ChatGPT, it adds maybe another second of that equivalent. But the problem is, to your point about heat domes and noise, the problem is that these data centers are being deployed in places that can't support them, and in neighborhoods that aren't ready to handle it. And, xAI, the Grok AI, deployed a data center to Memphis, Tennessee without thinking about the power grid, completely overloaded it, and had to bring in gas-powered generators to keep it online, which is just crazy for the environment. And to make matters worse, many cities are subsidizing the cost of electricity for these data centers, which basically removes the footprint or the math about the cost of damaging the environment to these companies at all. So like the conversation with GMOs, Monsanto and so on, it's important to separate the business of AI from the technology of AI. And when we think about legislation, the thing that's on my mind is, how do we hold AI companies accountable and encourage them to do the right thing? Because I think the technology is wondrous. I think many of us probably share that. The things that AI can do, ChatGPT can do for us is incredible. And yet there is a cost that, we have to figure out, thinking, very ambitiously, how do we encourage legislation to force AI companies to act more ethically? Just to talk about one more thing, you mentioned training data. I think this is a really important point that is very tough to say. Every modern AI model, I'll say there are two AI models right now. You're asking about what is the most ethical AI model to use. The two AI models right now that are considered to be the most ethical are probably Firefly from Adobe and Getty AI. So if you go to Getty Images and ask it to create an image, those two things are generally understood to be trained on stock photos where they compensated the creators of those stock photos. You can still have an argument that's still unethical because it's creating a substitutive work for the stock photo, right? Where now that person's not going to get. But anyway, every other AI, it is trained on unlicensed works that have been scraped or stolen in one form or another. And that is ethically, I think, a problem. And yet, it's hard to think of a replacement for various reasons. Historical bias. We want to favor more modern contemporary works. Otherwise, things get historically biased into a mode where everything was created by white male authors. So it's a complicated problem. And yet, I think that, again, my personal view is that we should encourage legislation to encourage AI companies to be forced to only use licensed content, because I think the money is there. And if we push for that, better licensed models will arrive. But at the same time, how do we not? With the tools that are available, how do we not allow ourselves to use them to remain competitive? Because if we don't, someone else will. And I know that's a very antagonistic and negative view to take, but that's sort of where I am in terms of me saying, giving myself license to use these tools, even if I feel they are currently unethical.
Yeah, I love that. And I will say also with Firefly, I've used that one. So good for me. I used an ethical one accidentally. But I got frustrated and stopped using it because I was like, this doesn't work as good as as the unethical ones. And also what I heard there was, okay, if I have a frozen burrito and I microwave it for 3 minutes, that is building up so many ChatGPT prompts that I can balance that out with. So if I just eat a frozen burrito without microwaving it, I can do like a whole week of ChatGPT prompts and not feel like I'm the worst human being. That's what I heard. Thank you. Ari, or I guess it was Jay first. Ari. Ari, you were first. Ari, what do you have?
Yeah, so I just wanted to piggyback off of what you just said, Ethan, and the last bit of what David just said about our output being faster as artists. The other thing that we need to add to this conversation is how we view work since the pandemic. And I think that that's coupled with like budget cuts, both in academia as well as theaters around the country. So I feel, and maybe this is just a personal feeling of mine, but I do feel like physical work is not necessarily valued as much, which means that you as an artist has to work a lot harder. So it kind of pushes you to use AI because you don't have that support within the theater or even in academic spaces. So I think a lot of this conversation is about like, how do we view work and workers? Like, what is the value of work?
Yeah. Jay.
The thing I was thinking is beyond our environmental things. If AI created puppies and kittens, is it still, like David brought up, from stealing other people's work? Is it ethical? Is it ethical as an artist? Because also, like Ari said, there is no soul. This is the old folk story of stone soup. Instead of people bringing something, they just bring the stone. So the soup has no flavor to it. No one is feeding things in. It is just taking from the giant model of history. But the other thing that I'm going to throw in is David using AI for video for theater. That, to me, is a lot like the automated water chisels on statues. In Italy, in Carrara, where the marble is, they use water to base out their statues and then carve on top. And everybody was in an uproar. It's like, you didn't make the art. But if we look at all of the classic art studios throughout history, Michelangelo, everybody way back, they had apprentices and everybody already doing that so the master could come by and finish it off. Or they were doing it in the style of his work. So this is something that's been going on. I mean, our cave art, somebody was like, blew the thing on the hand, and somebody was like, oh, I want one of those hands. So they're going to steal that idea, but it all builds on each other. So yeah, then where is our line I'm sorry, I'm going to hit another thing. There's a group down in Florida that they're doing AI play where it's 7 people and it's based on the 7 ages of man. So they do prompts from the audience and they do a different show every night. And I see that as okay because you're still using the classical text, even though it's generative, but you're also using actors as ways of, okay, it's a good exploration. This is a Frankenstein we've created, like many other ones. They said TV was going to kill theater. They said radio, film, but we stuck around. So
Yeah. And I'll just put myself out there as like a villain here, potentially, because I did. But this is back to Ari's thought of like, how do we value human work or human artistry? And I did a projection design in May, and we wanted some animations so that I wanted an artist to animate some things that I could then float around the stage and put them in a spaceship and send them off. And the producer just said, no, we can't do that. So what did I do? Right? Like I went and I took our marketing materials like that we had gotten off of Fiverr, and I took that artist rendering of the characters, and then I just generated the stuff from there. And then from that, I put it in After Effects and did all this extra work. So one, I didn't get the animator paid, so that's bad. And then I obviously went to AI and I generated stuff. But then after that point, like it was all me. Like those little things I generated would have been nothing had I not then put them into the story and into the action and put, backgrounds. And had I not used the AI, my alternative was going to be Google or Getty Images or something like that, or just drawing it myself, like in a much not as visually appealing way, but it would have worked. And so like those would have been my alternatives, but I went the AI route because I thought, well, this will just be better all around. So I don't have a moral to that other than I did it, and I'm like wrestling with like, was that wrong? Was that right? I'm not really. It doesn't keep me up at night. I've moved on with my life. So there's that. Okay, David.
I want to talk about labor displacement for a moment, because I think that's what you're getting at, and as well as education. And I want to talk about those two things briefly because one I'm very optimistic about and one I'm terrified about, and I don't have a good answer. And I think this is to Anita's points about education, which I'm still grappling with. So in terms of labor displacement, I am very optimistic about it, to be completely honest. Like, as other people have said, technology has always come into the theater and we've always adapted with it. And I think, like right now, the two companies to keep your eyes on in the future are A24 and Disney. Because A24 especially has announced their collaboration with, I think it's Google Deep Dream, to pipeline AI workflows in many of their movies coming out. And, the cost of AI is pennies. I mean, not even pennies, less than that, pennies on the dollar compared to labor. So let's watch their credits. Like, do their credits get shorter? Do their budgets get smaller for the same amount of work? My instinct is no. My instinct is AI is going to be added onto human workflows, because without it, it's slop. We all, I think, get that, right? Human intervention in AI is what we need. And, I'm of the opinion that, AI can get faster and faster, but AI can never approach, or is approaching, but never exceeding human mastery. The best of us will still be better than AI, no matter what, right? Like AI can get faster, and I think the best case scenario are the masters are able to simply create faster, right? Without actually having to compete with AI, but AI is just a tool in our toolbox. That being said, the challenge here is, it's not going to take over the lighting design, but it is going to replace the lighting design assistant. And that's what I'm really concerned about, because a lot of the tasks that assistants have done have been more routine, more repetitive, much more vulnerable for replacement. And so I wonder as an AI enthusiast, this is what terrifies me and I don't have a good answer for. We already have to fight tooth and nail with producers to get assistants hired. Now, when they know that, that paperwork could be done with ChatGPT, how do we create and foster young designers and support them in their career when those more repetitive aspects of our job, which is part of the training process, get replaced? And as a corollary to that, when I taught at UC Irvine, I taught grad students, I was teaching right when generative AI was really coming out, and I had to grapple with, okay, so here's our lesson in Photoshop. You have to replace this object. Do I teach them how to use the clone stamp tool and actually replace that object and clean that image up? Or do I just show them generative aware fill and move on and use that time productively for something else more important? And so the question for education is, they told us, learn your multiplication tables because you won't have a calculator in your pocket all your life. Well, that was a lie. We all have a calculator in our pocket now, right? So there's a legitimate question, what can we offload to AI? Certainly there are things, right? No one knows how to use a map to navigate anymore, right? There are things that we don't know how to do, and that's okay. What can we let students get away with trusting AI to do? What tasks can we forget? And what is absolutely required for becoming that master? And how do we support that journey? So that's what's concerning me about labor. Not necessarily that the masters will be replaced, but how do we get people to become masters in today's AI-assisted age?
Yeah. All right. We're halfway through our time. So this ethics has been wonderful. And I want to navigate us or pivot us to how we're using it. And Sunny, you haven't talked yet. So I'll start with you.
Thank you.
If you're cool. And then the question really is just how are you using it today? How are you incorporating it into your workflow?
Wow, I've been getting a lot of help from the AI machines because I came to the United States from South Korea 20 years ago when I was 30 years old. And I just put into a graduate school as a graduate student assistant in a theater sound design program. I've been a sound engineer 7 years before I came here. So for me to work doing sound engineering without any language was great. But I went to the theater school, which had to analyze a script. And then I walked into a completely different opposite side of the world. Like I landed in Mars, some other planets. At that time, I also only had paper dictionary. So whenever I had to analyze a script to design sound, it was really hard. I just got the meaning of that word itself. But nowadays, when I get the script in Shakespeare, it saves 100 times of my prep work. Like David mentioned, I had to bother so much of dramaturge, assistant director to get the meaning out of this script. What do they mean? But now I just type it in both languages, in English and Korean, and mix them together in the sentence when I ask questions. And then it comes out, oh, this nuance is this thing. Where did you find this? Yeah, I read the script of this one. And then AI replies, oh, that means in 1930s, Americans in New York City were using these words for these things. And then they gave me all the examples. So saving so much of time. But in addition to that, when I write emails, so I write in English, like, what do you think? What's this nuance? Is it good for this kind of purpose? And ask questions in Korean, not even standard Korean mix of my just daily Korean slang language. And they answered all of those. And they give me option 1, 2, 3. And then I mix those together. What do you think? How about this will be great for me to ask the questions to American people. They said, oh, this is perfect for this kind of situation. It's really great tool for me to use. So that's where I heavily use as a research assistant.
That's amazing. I remember when I was in college, I did the Scottish play, and I swear I'm a theater designer, but Shakespeare is very challenging for me to understand, and it's like miserable RS, like reading a script. I as a designer, I tend not to watch any previous productions if it's a well-known show, and that's just for my own self. Like I don't want to get preconceived notions, but Shakespeare is the one thing where I will watch because it's like I need all the context. But even just watching it, that's going to take me 3 hours of my life, which is fine. But I can see how AI might be able to help me in that regard.
It used to be a week for me.
Yeah. Anita, what do you have?
So I use a lot of things. I don't let my students use as many things as I use. Right? Because they need to learn how to do it. right? And I already know how to do it, so I feel like the shortcut is okay. So like scene breakdown, right? Especially of a Shakespeare play, like where's each scene set, right? What's the location, right? That is a shortcut for me. Do they need to read the play and figure that out? Yes. Or sometimes what I'll do, because they're going to do it anyway, right? They're going to put it into AI anyway, is I will tell them, okay, do a scene breakdown in it, put it in, do the scene breakdown. And then I want you to compare it to what's actually in the script and find the errors. Without exception, AI will make an error. Okay, like the first time we were practicing with it at Davidson, and the thing was like, let's make a logo for Davidson College, and it misspelled college, and it's like, well, okay, you kind of got to double check that stuff because you don't want, your whole logo of your entire institution to be misspelled, right? So for students, sometimes I'm like, oh, I know they're going to do this anyway, so why don't we make it a task of compare and contrast? So things like that are very helpful to me. I will, if I cannot find an image anywhere else, I will be like, can you show me an image of whatever, like 4 columns with palm trees in between them, because I can't like find it anywhere else. I tend to ask it a lot of questions. Sometimes putting in, like, again, an email or something that I'm gonna send to a director or other designers and be like, "Hey, can you make this more concise?" Am I expressing the idea? So things like that are very helpful. I think iterations of images are very helpful until it gets to the point where it just keeps spitting out the same image no matter how many times you tell it to, like, change it, like, "Make it blue," and it's like, "Nope, here's the pink one," and I'm like, "Okay, well, we're done. Now I'm going into Photoshop, and I'm just gonna do it myself," right? And so I think, like, using it as a tool, I think, to David's point, those are assistant designer jobs, right? But I don't usually have an assistant designer, not because AI took them away from me, but just because I don't have one. And so I need to save time. But what I will say is that to date, AI does not understand what a theater is. It does not understand what a ground plan is. It does not understand what technical drawings are. It cannot produce scale elevations. It really cannot do a lot of the things that I do. Maybe that will change in the future, but I also think that not I don't think that the people doing these algorithms are really bothered by whether AI can make a scale ground plan. Do you know what I mean? So I don't know that theater's the target that they're going after. So I mean, it'll spit out something and I'll be like, that's ridiculous. You can't that can't go on stage, right? It's like 400 feet tall, and it's a painting, right? It's a painting. And so I would never show that to a director because, oh my gosh, I'm so excited. That looks amazing. Let's do that. And it's like, well, this is impossible. This is not a piece of theater. This is a piece of, like, fake art. And that art might be beautiful, but it is not helpful. So, just to your point, I like smaller tasks that can save me time. I definitely use it for. If I can't find an image and I'm just like, I gotta, like, find something because I want to show the director this, but do it can't do storytelling, and it can't do the tasks that I need to do to communicate the design to other people in the design and production process.
Yeah. And that's how I feel too with students. I feel that they pretty much have to learn everything because my thought is, okay, it might be able to give you something that, let's just say it generates something that's perfect paperwork or a perfect set sketch or something. But inevitably, it's going to be like, well, the actor needs to enter from that other door or the light needs to go over here. And then you have to make changes to that. And like you're saying, you put in the image and it generates the same one back to you, even though you're asking it to change the background from red to blue, and it just won't do it. And my workaround for that has been throw it into a whole different chat and then ask the question again before I go to Photoshop. That's mildly successful. But inevitably, like on a ground plane, right? Yeah, like we need to move the door, 3/4 of an inch. Well, how is it going to? As of right now, I don't see it being able to change that, like without a really extreme prompt from me. And so I'm super reliant on the AI. So then I think that students just have to learn it all, because it's like, yeah, you can get a big portion of it done, but you inevitably are going to have to go in and tweak it. And that's where a human element, to me, is for the foreseeable future is still going to be very important. Jay, you have your hand up.
I am old and I'm a traditionalist. And I know this is a judgment-free zone, but you read your text. 3 hours is too long to listen to. You're going to watch a Shakespeare instead of reading it? Shame on you. The reason for that, I know it's important, but we have to look at the text. The text is why we're doing it. And like Anita said about the images and all the images that we create, when you get an AI image, we know it's AI. And we do that because we're pattern recognition people in the arts. So we're going to see that canny valley where things don't match up. And we like it until we realize that we're being poisoned, that we're being lied to. Why is that guy got 8 fingers? Why is this? And then it's like, oh my God, this is creepy. But we do have to get to that text. And we have to read that text over and over and over and over. If you don't like Shakespeare, that's fine. But if you're working on that show, you have to get in there and know that show inside out. One of the things we're talking about, the 7 stages of man. Do you guys know that those represent the classical planets? The moon is infancy, Mercury. So all the stages of life relate to those. But if you don't immerse yourself in the text, you're not going to know that. When Ophelia gives Rosemary for remembrance, Rosemary's been used since the Greek times to have people remember. They break it and use it when they're learning. And now at Mayo Clinic, they're using enzymes from rosemary to halt Alzheimer's. So all of these things that are folk and traditions from all around the world are going through this filter. And I'm afraid that the thought that came up when Sunny was talking is when you were doing it in Korean and then doing it in English, there is thoughts and cultural differences that are so different in a Korean household. Like Denzel Washington was talking about a Black family's Sunday morning, what the smells of a Sunday morning are like. And that's people doing their hair, the food, everything before church. I will never know that. I can't share that because that's not my memory. But if we don't share those things to the people, how are they going to want to see anything that doesn't represent them? When we water it down so much, we don't get the textures of what theater is. And having people in a group together, even though doing stuff solo is good, but having people in group together is how you get those ideas, how you get that team. So I just had to be an old man. Get your ball off my lawn.
Just to defend myself, I had the script. I had the script in my hand as I was watching along with it. All right, I can't not go through the script.
That makes it so much better.
Carl, your hand's up.
Yeah, I mean, I think I'm probably a little bit more in the traditionalist camp as it pertains to like the work that I'm creating specifically in theater as a lighting designer. I mean, I think of the way that I integrate AI in a sort of more holistic sense. Like, if time is my most valuable asset, like what can I do and what can I offload to maximize my time? So I think of myself as like, there are certain areas in theater where I think of myself as a specialist. I'm very good at creating stage pictures. I'm very good at creating paperwork. I'm very good at doing certain things within theater. Those are my specializations. Like, those are my superpowers. There are a ton of other things that are required to be a generalist in to work in the arts right now, and so many of us who are who work independently, who don't have, like, speaking for myself, like, I don't have an agent, I don't have a manager, I don't use studio assistants or a personal assistant in my life, but I still have to do all these things, and I still want to spend time with my family, and I still want to do all these other. So, like, how can where I integrate a lot of AI in my life is like doing a lot of those other tasks so that I can dedicate the time that I want to dedicate towards creating good quality, clear paperwork. Because I know that there are designers who are using AI for paperwork, cue sheets, those sorts of things. I don't have any interest in doing that because I take a lot of pleasure in doing that. I take a lot of pride in doing that. So, like, that's an area where I'm not going to offload that to AI, even though it might be a good use for it. What I am going to offload to AI is like a negotiation with a theater or a negotiation with a producer. Like, that's a great use for me of, like, I could spend a ton of time trying to craft this properly, or I could activate AI to help me figure out the right rate and the right time commitments, and utilizing all this other information that's out there in the ether of how to put myself in the best possible position in a negotiation. If I'm engaged in some sort of, like, dispute with a credit card company, or so, I just had an interaction. I was just in France last week, and we were really close to the Bordeaux fires. I had to change my flight. I was trying to, like, get the airline to reimburse me for that. They're not. So now it's like, if I wasn't going to engage AI, am I really going to spend a bunch of my time and energy trying to get 200 euros back? It's not worth my time to dedicate 4 hours to structure this, but it is worth 15 minutes for me to pump the information that went into this into AI, and for AI to pull up all these resources and all these reasons why the airline should refund me the 200 euros because all these roads were closed. It was doing all this research that, like, I don't have time to do any of that. And so to me, that's more time that I can dedicate towards something that's actually important to me. But it is still like a generalist task that, just as a person, I have to do all these other things. So it's really just kind of like a time question for me, and a division of labor question for me of, like, where do I want to spend my time? And I try to spend it doing the things that I really care about. And then I try to let those other things that I still have to do as a person, as a father, as a professional, I still need those things to happen. So how can I offload some of that onto an AI workflow to help me get closer to that? For me personally, I think, like, AI fills that generalist gap, but it doesn't really do the specialist work. Like, I still do that. It's really important to me that I do that. But that generalist gap, like, ethically, I don't feel bad having AI tackle generalist work.
Yeah. Ari.
Hey, I just wanted to piggyback again off of what Jay was saying about just doing the meat and potatoes work of what we do. I'm an educator, and in the past couple of years, I have seen a certain level of despair or indifference when it comes to my students. And I don't think it's necessarily just social media or AI or all of that. I think it's that they're feeling a lot of despair with what's going on in the world, and what the future holds. And so when they come to the classroom, it's sort of like, well, why is it important for me to do my breakdown? Why is it important for me to learn how to properly draw in proportion? So I mean, there's a lot of issues with trying to figure out the solution to that, but theater and storytelling is a necessity, but it's also a luxury, where what we're doing is not integral to our survival as a species, but it is important for our soul survival. If you are going to get into this business, there is a easier way to make a dollar. So you should want to do the tedious work.
Here.
Like, if you're just trying to do a shortcut, you should choose something else, because it's going to be a long road ahead of you.
Yeah, I love that. And also hailing back to Carl's point about the generalist tasks. And I think that with assistants, and David, I know you said, well, the assistant line designer will go away. And I still don't see that.
I hope you're right.
I guess the way I use an assistant is I try often to like not body double. So I'll try to say like, oh, if there's a time where I can be in the space and you cannot be in the space, or you can come late, or vice versa, and then I'll leave early and you stay late. I try to use my assistants in that way. The design is like the task, but me as the designer and you as the assistant, those are like separate tasks. There's still enough human body in the space with my assistants that I don't see how they could, like, if a producer says they're going away, I mean, I guess I can make that work, but like the foul spots aren't getting tracked, right? You know, like like I could see, and maybe I should try this, of like getting the foul spot sheet through AI, like get it started. But again, when they enter down left and then they're switching that to up right, I don't see the AI keeping up with that or following through.
I do props. What's an assistant?
We'll get to that on the props and AI episode. David, your hand is up.
Well, I just wanted to actually address one point, and then I was going to talk about how I use AI. But to Anita's point, you mentioned early on that AI can't do a scale drawing, and I just want to say, from a technical perspective, AI will never be able to do a scale drawing. And the reason why is very specific. And it's not like to say that AI will never get smart enough. It's just that the fundamental way that AI is being created, it's pattern recognition. I find it helpful to add ness at the end of every noun and adjective you put into AI. So that's why, for example, AI had a hard time with fingers, is because it knows at the end of a hand goes fingers. How many fingers? It can't count to 5. It only knows fiveness. What does 5 kind of look like, right? It has no internal logic. So being able to put a door generally here, it can do, but at a specific measurement, at a specific distance, those concepts are always going to be outside of the realm of at least our current way that we create diffusion models. It's just fundamentally antithetical to the way they're created. So that's good. But in terms of like the way that I use AI, like obviously generating images and video, of course, and I do pride myself that you can't tell they're AI when they're in their final form. A human created the original, AI makes a small modification, and then the human finishes the job, right, in After Effects, in Photoshop, and whatever. But one thing that I'll disagree with Anita on, in terms of my own way of doing things, is I do find AI extremely helpful for cross-departmental communication when used selectively. And I'll give you just one example. So I was doing a show where the lighting designer and the scenic designer, we were having trouble with a projector position where shadows were going to be created, and they were going to look not great because of the way that the scenic element was going to block the projector. And so for something like that, to go into ChatGPT, in this case, I used, I think, Gemini, the image edit model with Google Gemini, and said, hey, and I laid it all out. Here's the scale model. Here's the rendering. Here's the object. And I drew on it with a little green marker. Here's where I think the shadows are going to go because of the placement of the projector. Can you visualize and render this in a way that demonstrates how shadows will look like with this? And then I also uploaded a projectable image with this image overlaid. And those things combined, it was able to create a realistic image, which I could show and to demonstrate what would go wrong if the current plan was enacted. And it helped communicate, right? So I think those kinds of things, like for a costume designer, just trying out, what about this fabric? What if this material was leather? What if this material was denim? Like, what would that look like? And it's really dangerous, like to your point, Anita, it's really dangerous to show the director too much because it gets in their head like it's going to look exactly like this. And that's like the worst, right? So it is really challenging to figure out that line. But I think as AI tools become more ubiquitous, directors are going to be able to let go a little bit better, I hope, to be able to indulge us to show these things in a way that helps prompt discussion as opposed to end discussion. But the big thing that I wanted to say that I think hasn't been said yet is note-taking. And this is the thing that has actually, more than anything else in AI, has completely changed my life. So like I have Applaud. It's this little guy that goes in the back of your phone. You can use it on Zoom calls to take notes. But basically what it does is it note takes everything that's said. It organizes it in easy to, break apart breakdowns of who said what and the action items and the plans. And in Applaud, you can provide your own context, your own prompt. So I can say, I work in live design. I work in theater. Everything, if you hear the word psych, I'm not going to the psychologist. It's a cyclorama. Like I give it everything, all the context it needs so it knows what I'm talking about, right? Because you got to help it out. But then it gives me this breakdown. And so I can have meetings with directors, meetings with everyone, have all this information. And then I go to ChatGPT and say, hey, ChatGPT, here's the script. Here's my big picture plans. Here's my vision for the projection design. Here are the scenes in order. And then with all this being said, please scaffold my notes from all these sources where I had all these ideas and put them in a logical order so that I can read my own ideas later and then I can figure out what I want to do and I can figure out how I want to design this show. Those kinds of tasks of just like organizing my brain and the many ideas I have in the many places they are, those are the things that I love AI for because it's not thinking for me, it's helping me to think. And I'm very scatterbrained otherwise. So that's the thing that I don't know how I could have lived without before.
Yeah, and Anita, I want you to get to respond, but I will say, David, that Don Chang, who is going to be on a future lighting designer AI episode, she actually mentioned you in your note taking for a production where she said you guys had all gone scene by scene in the Zoom, and then you had sent the notes later, and she was able to use that as the scene by scene of, oh, this is what's happening in this scene and this that there. And then I had another thought, but I forgot it. So Anita, the floor is yours.
Yeah, I just want to follow up and say that there's no way that we're not using AI, right? Like the youth, and they stay the same age while I get older. I don't know how they do that trick. It's really annoying. They're using this stuff, right? I mean, and there's all the like, oh, the essay was written by them, and now they're getting kicked out of school. Like there's all that kind of stuff, but you cannot stop them from using this machine. So I think we have an obligation to show them how it can be a tool that helps us evolve our storytelling, but that it does not replace the storyteller or the storytelling. I think we all grapple with in different disciplines, in different places, and different students, whatever. Like and other designers like, well, how do we do that exactly, and what are we willing to do, what are we willing to let them do, or whatever. But it has to be addressed, and I think bringing up the ethical issues is also a good also needs to happen, right? So they understand the broader context of what they're doing and what they're asking for. But let me tell you, like, designer on the left who's using AI is going to get the gig faster than me because what they're able to put out something that if I said, oh, I'm just going to, not use AI at all, right? Like, again, to Carl's point about time, as a resource, it can't be the storyteller, but it can aid us in some artifacts that can help us be better storytellers.
Yeah. I also wanted to talk Carl's generalist point, and also Anita, before you were saying, well, can't you just call the eye doctor or whatnot? But going back to that projection design, I was using QLab in ways that I hadn't before. And so I was Googling, how do you do this? And a lot of times it would just automatically, depending on what web browser I was in, it would automatically give me an AI answer. And I will say that a lot of times those AI answers were much faster for me than the original Googling of like going to the forum post, because it would say, well, there's these 3 forums and these are the 3 things you can try. That made me a lot faster than I would have been otherwise. I realized that a lot of us on this call, maybe all of us, are educators. And I actually have this question that's out of the blue, completely going off the rails here. But last year, my AI statement in the syllabi was, you can use AI. You just have to let us know if it's significant to the work. You have to let us know that ahead of time. If not, and we ask you about it, you have to be honest with us. And then you also have to show us how you achieve that result. And then also, if I ask you not to use it, then you can't use it. That was it was sort of like anything goes in a way. And it turned out my students are very anti-AI. So it was very seldom that I ever saw any used. But I'm just curious, does anybody have an AI statement in their syllabus for the upcoming semester, and what is it?
Mine is almost identical to what you just said. But I put in there, like, there's times that I'm going to ask you to use it, and then otherwise we're not we're not going to use it. But I explicitly say that if you turn in something from AI, that is not your work, right? You cannot take credit for somebody else's work. I don't care if a machine made it. It's not your work. And so you cannot turn in a thing and be like, well, I did this, right? Like, this is my design, whatever, my, rendering, whatever. But almost identical to yours.
Pace has one that just is a blanket, pretty much saying the same thing, but just encouraging not to use.
Just being an educator for 18 years, and then I've been through 3 different colleges. And then the first students I got was Gen Millennial. And then when Gen G came out in a week before the semester starts, the faculty gets the orientation, and then there's a PhD in education came out with a big PowerPoint and then taught us how to deal with Gen G, what they are, how to do that. And now we are getting the Gen Alpha, which is my nieces are inside of those. And so I see how all this technology affect their homework, especially for the essays, like after seeing a show and then what do you like? And then based on the Aristotle's like 6 elements and then analyze all those. And I think about 5 years ago, out of 50 students, I taught a gen ed class for general students, and they were engineering students, business students, a lot of them. We went down to the city to see the show, and then we write about it, talk about it. That was the whole point of the class. And then suddenly 80% of students' essay looked like a graduate student's dissertation level for this undergrad from business and engineering. That's impossible for them to know. Whoa, what happened? And then suddenly there's a big faculty meeting from liberal arts professors. We cannot allow this one because they don't read, they don't think. Our children cannot put their thought together in our own language. So liberal arts professors flipped out. And then for me, we're like, wow, they did the homework. Great. And then they bothered to go to another website and do the homework because I didn't care about those. And luckily, I'm teaching at BFA school now, and our students, the homework they write about things they saw, they don't use them, and they still put out very poor essays for English professors' view. It's a horrible writing, even for me, a foreigner. But they put their own thoughts, and then when they give us in breakdown or make some sound out of it, they put their original homework. But one thing I gave them, like, find out some research project, like what's grand rights, and then small rights, some getting this right questions, those kind of things. My students don't even bother to use AI. They give all the wrong answers. So I think I love my very authentic, pure soul of my Purchase College design tech students.
I love that. I will say that my students at Webster, when we went over that AI note in the syllabus, they were sort of mad at me because they're like, Ethan, we should not be using AI. And so like, I wasn't expecting them to sort of, respond that way.
I'll just jump in and just briefly say, I haven't taught for a couple of years now. So I no longer have that element of my brain other than it's a concern of mine. If I were teaching again, the lesser of two evils is using AI to polish the final output than for use in the process. I would rather see the final output be polished and AI and beautiful and fine, as long as there's proof, to your point about labeling, that the thought went into the process that they can document and demonstrate. That's how I use AI in my own work. AI is used in the last step, well, not the last step, but the penultimate step to really give production value. Because I think the danger is, like we all know, high production value can hide a bad script. And I think a lot of students get lulled into a false sense of security that because their work looks really good, it is good. And they didn't think about how that fluency can disguise the falsehoods in the logic, or how all the details in the generated image can disguise defects like too many fingers. I don't mind the output being polished with AI. I just worry about the process being robbed of them.
Yeah. And I will also say actually that I had like 2 papers in the semester last semester, and I made them handwrite them. That was one way that I was just like, this will get rid of a lot of the AI. Carl, go ahead.
Yeah, I also haven't taught in a couple years, and when I was teaching, it wasn't even on the radar. But I'm on the board for USA 29, and the concepts. I mean, that AI is part of the conversation right now, obviously amongst the design community and the theatrical community. We can put a link in the notes. 829 has some resources that one of the tech and innovation committees has put together. But again, it's like whenever we put together these sort of documents, any of these committees meet to pull together resources, it feels like everything's out of date within 6 months. The industry's moving so fast. So yeah, I mean, I think that just speaks to the relevance of having a conversation like this, and also the disclaimer that you put at the beginning of this, that if somebody's listening to this in 2027 or 28, everything's going to be different. So you're welcome.
Yeah. Well, something that I appreciate about this conversation is I feel like we're not all united, certainly. And I don't have representation from somebody who is anti-AI. And that's actually another conversation I want to have as a group of those people to just have that conversation. So I didn't bring them into this discussion because I thought of it too late. But I feel like we have gotten through this conversation as like ways that we're sort of all okay using AI. And I'm appreciating that thread for myself. And then we're nearing the end of our time. David, I want to address a couple questions for you just because I realized I sort of skipped over them without really understanding. And we don't have a lot of time, so don't give me the real answer, but an abbreviated version. And that is, you mentioned a local system that you're doing at home. I've heard asking other people to partake in these conversations. They've mentioned like, oh yeah, I have an LLM at home, large language model, doing XYZ, or I've fed it a certain amount of things. How do I do that? Because all I know is ChatGPT. And I know that's a crazy question to even ask, but like that sounds sort of ethical-ish more to me.
Yes. So local models, like any models, still are mostly unlicensed in terms of their training, which is an ethical black hole still that is worth discussing. But yes, if you do deploy a local model, you run it on your own computer. If you have a MacBook Pro or something like that with an M1 or M2 chip, those things, they can run models, but it's kind of weaker. Generally speaking, you need to invest in a big old NVIDIA GPU, something that costs like $2,000. So there's a big hardware barrier to entry. And then ChatGPT can help you with Python coding. You can copy and paste a lot of stuff. It's not impossible, but it is a very steep learning curve to start using local AI. But the advantages are, I've done many projects now where I have trained my own LoRAs, or low rank adaptation models. They're mini models that push the main model towards something. And so I trained it on guaranteed public domain art of a certain style. In this case, it was woodcut paintings from Japan, where I could more accurately know that everything that's being created is from this pool of 50 public domain images that I trained it on. So there are significant ethical advantages to working local. They're all free models, so I haven't paid anything to the AI companies for the training for data centers like that. So I'm sort of like, it's an effective boycott in a way to do it that way. But there, make no mistake, very steep barrier in terms of technical knowledge. But, we have the USA 829 computer artists subcategory, right? And I know there are many of those people who have started to advertise or publicly disclose that they're using AI, like hire union kin to, I'm not sure if we're all union, by the way. I'm not sure if that's a thing, but if you are part of the union, hire a union kin who can.
I'm a props person. What's a union?
Oh yeah, right. Sorry, Jay. But, I think there is a way where we can be pro-union, absolutely, and push for ethical ways of doing things. And this is potentially one of them. So that's the long and the short of it.
That's amazing. Yes, you certainly talked me out of doing it. I'm not going to pursue it. But I will say that when I took on that projection design this year, I learned After Effects, QLab, certain AI things that I just had no experience. Photoshop, I had known it 20 years ago, but I relearned it. So I learned a ton. Just saying that out loud, that while I'm not going to pursue this path because you've already talked me out of it, I could actually see a world in which that could become my future if I get into this. Okay, and one last question, David. We mentioned diffusion models and large language models. What are those? I don't know what those mean.
So, yeah. So a diffusion model basically is an image generator. They're both trained in very similar ways, but diffusion creates images and large language models create text. That's basically the important thing you need to know. With an AI system like ChatGPT, it really is amazing. So what ChatGPT is, when you talk to it, is it's a large language model that is like the customer service agent. It's trained primarily on understanding what you want and looking around at context. And then it acts as, there are three terms, an orchestrator model, a router model, or a mixture of experts model. They all mean the same thing. ChatGPT basically says, hey, it sounds like you need the web search model. It sounds like you need the vision model to look at this image and figure out what it is. It sounds like you need, et cetera, et cetera. And so what ChatGPT as a router model is, it invokes all these other models, which all combine to answer your question. A large language model is just the text model, and diffusion is just the image. So, for example, you mentioned Midjourney. Midjourney is like the classic way of just encountering a diffusion model online.
Amazing. Thank you. Okay, so we're out of time, but just let's do a really quick around the circle here. What is, if anything, what you're hoping to maybe use AI for next? Like, is there something that you're working on that you're trying? Like for me, my next step is I'm going to make a spot calling cue sheet from, I don't know, using AI. I don't know exactly how that's going to happen, but that's going to be something I'm going to try just to see, just more so to help myself learn, like, how would I even ask the AI to do that? So yeah, so if that was a clear question, is there anything that you're hoping to use AI for in your next steps of life?
I'm not sure if I have a good answer. I've sort of found a workflow, and there is no particular tool that is really exciting to me. I like to try and, the script comes first, the show comes first, and figuring out what the tool is, working backwards from there, is how I think a designer is supposed to operate. And so I try to be agnostic and not be focused on, because if all you have is a hammer, everything starts to look like a nail, right? There are plenty of shows I do now where I don't use AI at all because that's not the tool that's called for. But yeah, so nothing in particular.
Amazing. Carl, for you?
I'm not sure, like, in my design process, like, what I would want to use AI for that I don't currently use it for. But again, that landscape might change in the future. What I will say is, like, my Claude history has so much context of all the various queries that I've sent over there that one use case that I did use recently that I found was pretty useful is, like, more as just a conversation tool of, like, where am I going? What am I doing? What's my what's my focus right now? Like, and kind of where do you see, and like, not my mission per se, but just general senses of like, where do you see my focus? Because sometimes it's really hard for me to have a macro view of like what it is that I'm dedicating my energy on. I can look in my email, I can look in whatever, I can think about it. But I think my history with Claude is extensive enough that like it has a pretty good sense in my context of just like where I've dedicated energy. Sometimes I'll just ask it questions about that. That kind of gives me a little bit of a motivation to think like, where do I want to focus my energy on, like this year or this quarter or this summer? Like, where did I gain some fulfillment, or where did I ask a lot of questions, and like what might I want to do in the future?
Cool. Anita, how about you?
So, real quick, two things. We're writing a book, and we did all these interviews, and then, oh my gosh, my co-author is a genius of thinking of this. We're, we have all this quotes and everything, and he was able to feed the outline of the book and all of the interviews into Claude and say, what quotes go with what chapter. That was amazing. I mean, it was a game changer in terms of like, that mapping was incredible. And I don't know how he did it. And I asked him the other day, and he's like, I don't know how I did it either, but I did it, and it was amazing. So I think that that's super useful. And then the other thing is that, I was just sitting here thinking, talking about, like polishing the final thing, right? I'm curious, I build models, and then I take photos, and then I put them into Photoshop, and then I like give a little suggestion of lighting and, like make it dark around the edges, that kind of thing. I am wondering if AI can do any of that work for me. If I could say, like, here's the model, and I'd like it to, feel a little bit more like summer. Can you? I am curious to see what it would spit out. So that I think an experiment might be on the horizon.
Jay, what about you?
I am getting some really good ideas, but I don't use AI. I mean, I don't use it purposely for work because there's so much for me to train my students in coming up to this point. And again, because props is so different, it is a physical item that has to be created, and you can't do fake texts on a note, or you can't create anything like that because it's going to change, and the actors want that stuff on their. Yeah, I don't use it, and I actually turned in an article, and one of my coworkers said, "I don't understand this." Put it into Chat GBT, like a section of it, and said, "Oh, this makes sense." And it's like, no, use your logic, because that there a couple of sentences later it comes back to that. But I want people to have that discovery for themselves. And if you don't have that discovery, you're never going to have those synapses click to each other. You know what? Art only becomes art when it interacts with somebody else. Their reaction is art. We can do whatever we want, but until someone has a visceral human being reaction, it is nothing. And I believe that AI takes away from the authenticity of touching another human being's soul.
Love it. Ari.
I mean, in my own practice, I have tried to implement AI in my rendering style, but it's been a lot it's been very, very clunky. And ultimately, I have been able to kind of get a few pieces to implement into the final rendering, but it's never been smooth. So I do want to like play around with certain design programs to figure out how to implement it a little bit better. But something that came from this conversation that I didn't realize that people were doing was using AI in their paperwork. I'm kind of interested in that. I've always done my breakdowns, by reading the script and just doing it manually. But I am kind of interested to see if that process could be sped up. Like if I could just do a quick read and then do a breakdown, let AI actually do the breakdown, or maybe a piece list. So we'll see, but this conversation has really like opened my eyes.
Awesome. Sunny.
So sound engineering from AI for live sound is still not accurate because I ask some other things and they just, how about this to create this sound? And their suggestion really sucks. So I told them that you need to learn a lot, but that's current stage, but they may get better and better. They keep learning and see how that goes. There was, when I visited my parents last summer, there's a Korean musical theater program, got the big grant from AI, from government to do the research of AI. So they put out a musical with all AI. AI design, the scenic design, AI design, lighting design, sound design, all that. It was little, not authentic and little artificial, but that showed us the future possibility. So I want to see where things go. And then I want to be the witness for that. Thank you so much.
Fantastic. All right. Well, I cannot thank you all enough. Yeah, that's all I'll just say is thank you for letting me go over our time here. And thank you for the people who are up at the crack of dawn just because of how time zones work. So thank you. Yeah, I appreciate your time, your energy. And yeah, that's it. Thanks. That's it for this week's episode. A reminder that if you need links to anything we mentioned, like the USA 829 guidance, those are in the show notes and at artisticfinance.com/208. Now, because this topic is so complex, I don't want to call out too many takeaways, but I do have some. The first being something that went by quickly and I didn't sort of catch it until I listened back, and that is what makes artificial intelligence different than machine learning. So it's that computers are talking to computers to produce algorithms or models with billions upon billions of decisions. So we as humans don't actually understand how that happened because the AI is doing what we ask and what we prompt, but we don't actually know what it's doing. So this can only happen with us not knowing, because if we were to go through that billions and billions, it would take us years to trace sort of one prompt. And it's just not humanly possible to do such a thing. So that's what makes it AI, is that we don't actually know what it's doing. The points made about us as practitioners being forced to use AI, Ari said that theater is always underfunded, so we have to use these tools. Anita said that the people to the left and the right of us are using them, so we also have to use them if we want to keep working. Anita also said that it's our responsibility as educators. David echoed that point, and he also said that how can we not use it when everyone else's work is starting to use it and they're starting to do things that we're not able to do. So I do understand artists who choose not to use AI consciously, and I respect that as part of their existence. But I do think mainstream theater workers have to use AI tools merely to exist in modern society. And it's sort of like my thought on credit cards, right? You can exist without a credit card, but it's a challenge. I'm bringing this point up because, strong opinion here. I think that the easy answer for theater workers and their ethics is just no to AI. But I think a tougher choice right now is doing research and forging ahead in a way that you are comfortable with and that you can go show your face in public knowing that you have done the work. And that brings me to a hot take. Or I don't know if it's a hot take, but it's revelations that have come to me as I have put this AI panel discussion together. And that is that there are designers who are using AI, but they are not admitting it publicly. And I have no qualms with that. Your choices are your choices, and I don't understand what's going on in your life. But I did run into two examples of people who are being dishonest about it and denying that they're using it. And I don't know what to do with that. I know from my point of view, that's not ethical, but I'm bringing it up because really I just want to illustrate that this is a hot button issue. Like everybody who joined us today is talking in public and they're putting themselves out there. And I respect that so very much. But there are people that I am aware of that are being cagey. And I would never call them out in public because public shaming of individuals is way, way, way not my style. And it also goes against my safe space, which I provide. If I ever ask anybody on the show, I want them to be shown in the best of light. But which is worse, using our natural resources in our workflow or being hypocritical and dishonest? Obviously, that's apples and oranges. And it's actually icky for me to even bring it up, because I don't like bringing things up on the show that I can't actually talk about. But it's a touchy subject, and I think it's an important thing to mention because I respect people playing it safe, but I also don't think it's okay behavior. So there's that. Now, a takeaway from something that Anita said, and that was a reminder that theater, while it is our lives and our careers, it is just a tiny microcosm of the world. So the people behind AI models are not thinking of theater. So having it create accurate ground plans or generate our paperwork is not really on the horizon. And I'm pointing this out because I'm thinking that theater is one of the best places to be when we're worried about AI, because we do have a strong human element. People are the commodity of theater. So it will always be important for us to learn the craft and do the work. And Ari said that theater is a luxury. And so in line with that, working in theater is a luxury. So if there's a craft that we as participants and audience agree is good because of the human touch, theater is that craft. So from a self-fulfillment perspective, yes, us of those working in theater are doing something for humanity's soul, and it is right for us to do the work. If we're using AI for a shortcut to not do the work, then what is the point of doing this career when you could use those shortcuts elsewhere and work less and have consistent hours and get paid more, etc., etc.? And my final takeaway is a big thank you to David Murakami. He is a leader in this, and I am grateful for all the research he has done because he's giving me evidence that I'm not killing the planet and I'm not taking people's jobs, or at least I'm not doing that anytime soon. He also said that there are things like scale drawings that AI will never be able to do, and that is music to my ears. So again, to Jay, Anita, Carl, Ari, David, and Sunny, thank you so much. Now, you may be wondering why I'm saying thank you to the panel so much, and you might think I'm being overly grateful. I am not. Theater people are very strong in their ethical convictions, and I have gotten an inconvenient amount of feedback from people who are not wanting me to address AI with anything less than a negative perspective. But even with this strong feedback I've gotten, I am very glad that Vincent Gunn sent us down this rabbit hole because I have learned so much. My eyes haven't been opened, but I don't feel as bad if I need to go run a ChatGPT query. So I hope you join us for future episodes as we discuss AI with specific design areas. So even if you aren't a member of that design area, I'm finding that I am learning a lot from hearing different perspectives. Now, next week, our episode has nothing to do with AI, but if you're interested, join me to interview set designer Seth Howard and hear how he is managing a freelance theater career based in the Midwest. 2 weeks from now, we will have another AI discussion, and that will be with a panel of sound designers, and those are Owen Meadows, Justin Ellington, Amanda Ware, Sharath Patel, and we're joined again by Sunny Kill. Thank you for listening. That is it for today. Until next time, break a leg.
Thank you for listening to Artistic Finance, where we interview successful artists, leaders, and investors to help educate and inspire the creative community. To access our show notes and resources, go to artisticfinance.com. This show is for entertainment purposes only. Before making any decision, consult a professional. This show is copyrighted by Artistic Finance. Written permission must be granted before syndication or rebroadcasting.